To the Batmobile. Let's go.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. This is another YouTube exclusive here as part of the From the Cube podcasting network. My name is Jerome. Tonight we will be discussing Batman, the Caped Crusader, episodes 7 and 8. Please leave a like and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. You should also go ahead and subscribe on either Apple or Spotify. Leave a 4 or 5 star review. Again, we've been doing these YouTube exclusives with these more current animated shows, which has been really fun and really exciting. We've got just 2 episodes left of our discussion of Batman the Caped Crusader, but definitely on YouTube, we have discussed all 10 episodes of X-Men 97, as well as the first 6 episodes of Batman Caped Crusader. Brian, I have been in animation heaven, I guess you could say, because I've been getting a steady diet of Batman Caped Crusader. There was also a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show, and I've also been watching Star Trek Lower Decks. So my life has just been animation for the last few weeks.
Wow. I didn't even know that Ninja Turtle show was coming out, but then you told me about it, did some research on it. I like the animation style. Maybe that's, we could talk about it in the future, maybe as like a collective whole, but maybe kind of thing. But we'll see, because that series is longer than this series. But I'm kind of interested in that one as well, because it kind of ties into the new movie and the history and kind of like filling in the gaps between 1 and 2, so to speak. The second movie is coming out probably in the next 2 years, so this kind of that little stopgap for that. So I'm interested in the new Turtle show as well. Other viewing stuff, I just been kind of binge watching Modern Family for the first time, so that's interesting as well. I'm already on season 9, so there you go. That's a quick watch, easy to digest at night. Just kind of just laying. It's really hot here in the Valley, San Fernando Valley. So at nights, at like midnight, I'm just kind of like chilling outside, avoiding the bugs and watching Modern Family. So that's where I'm at. But moving on to Batman, these 2 episodes, I would say Moving Target, episode 7, is like the best homage that Batman's ever done to John Wick, if that makes any sense, because this was a total John Wick episode where one dude has a contract on his head, or we think it's a dude. We think it's Jim Gordon, but turns out it's Barbara Gordon that actually has the hit on her head. So that was interesting.
Big fan. Episode 7 is probably my favorite of the series so far, just because Batman is reduced to kind of a supporting role, and he does save the day in the end. But the episode is really about developing Montoya and Gordon as characters, and I'm a huge fan of that, and really establishing that James Gordon and Renee Montoya are to be trusted. I was in love with this episode, and it definitely had a very different feel. Like, even though you did kind of get the cartoony villain, I really, really like this episode a lot.
And it feels like they, I don't know, like they coordinated with like a fight coordinator for this, because it felt like the action scenes were drawn so realistically that it just seems like it was like something out of The Raid or John Wick or something like that, because they just felt like they really choreographed the martial arts and the fighting, and they just animated the sequences. So it was just really like some of the best action work they've done on this show. Probably some of the best action sequences I've seen in like a Batman's like animated series, to be honest. Especially like towards the end where they're just fighting in the kitchen. I thought that was so simple yet effective. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were able to see the action. We were able to see, like, like in for example, like a Jackie Chan movie, they'll show like a quick image of like a mug or something like that, and then all of a sudden the mug will be used later on in the fight, kind of thing. So they set these little things up in the kitchen, and it leads to the fight, and then it just leads to like them using the items in the kitchen at the end. So that was really cool, the way they set that up. And they really kind of showed you in this episode that Gordon is not really like the Gordon that we're used to. He's very much black and white, like he says. Like, he's very much like willing to just shoot on sight and just kill the guy, instead of giving the guy a second chance and letting him go through, like, getting arrested and reading his rights and all that kind of thing. That's more Barbara Gordon. So you can kind of tell there's this kind of like discourse between the father and the daughter. I guess Gordon is a little more conservative in terms of his in terms of his ways. Barbara Gordon's a little more liberal in terms of her ways, if that's kind of where we're going with this. Um, Jim Gordon has like, he even says specifically like he's black and white, so there's no gray for him. Maybe until the end of the episode. But like, there's one instance where he's like, I'm not leaving. If these guys are coming for me, I'm gonna stay in my house and they're gonna come for me. And he brings out a gun, and then his daughter's like, dude, what are you? Or maybe it was Montoya, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, if you start a shootout right now, you're gonna kill one of our neighbors killed. Like, you're putting people in danger. What are you thinking? And so it's that stubborn thinking that Jim Gordon has, this stubborn thinking now that leads to his decision. Okay, maybe you're right. I'm gonna leave the house to get away.
I really like that Gordon is wrong. I like that James Gordon has to be convinced to do the right thing by his daughter and by his kind of lieutenant. I think they're doing a really good job just bringing in Renee Montoya and Barbara Gordon as trusted characters. And of course, Barbara Gordon has become Batgirl in so many iterations. I'm sure she will do this. Again, it will be the same in this case, but I really like that Barbara Gordon is a character before she becomes Batgirl. That's the thing that is, to me, the difference, is that we are establishing her well beforehand. And the Renee Montoya stuff, I think, is really good. I love the fact that they take this very forgettable character that has kind of been used as fodder in so many cases and used as a traitor in the Dark Knight movie, and they're actually making her into someone that is well developed. And it would not surprise me if Montoya and Gordon become a couple at some point, and when Gordon becomes Batgirl, that will make for a very awkward situation.
Yeah, that's where it seems like it's leading to, and then Harley's going to be that third wheel, like asking for that date that she bailed on or whatever. That there's the love triangle coming for that, because they set that up in episode 5. But this moving target episode is just really well put together. Like I mentioned, the animation was really well done with the action sequences. And the twist at the end, because like, you really got to pick up on the dialogue to figure out the twist. Because the way they say it, it's like, okay, we put out a hit on Gordon. We put out a hit on Gordon. So whenever we as an audience hear the name Gordon, we just automatically assume it's Jim Gordon, right? So that's where
Absolutely.
like the writer plays with your head, and that's where the twist really comes in well at the end, where he goes, oh no, it's not for you, it's for Barbara. And then I was like, oh, that is so good, because as a writer,
I mean,
yeah,
I really liked it. Even if it was Jim Gordon, I think I would have been fine. Like, I think it would have still worked. But making it Barbara, I think it twisted the knife in the best possible way, and the fact that they established this the white cop as kind of this kind of good guy, and then he kind of turns out to also be someone that you can't trust. Love it, love it, love it. Corrigan, I believe, is the character, and it's so great. I mean, it would be so easy to either have him continue to be a good person or to kind of have him be another good cop. But they went all the way. And I love the fact that he is also corrupt in this series as well, and what eventually happens to him. It's really, really well done stuff. Just this episode from top to bottom is extremely well executed. Even the reason that they go into like the I don't know if you got those Back to the Future vibes when first they have to hide the car and then they go into the not developed suburban area. I don't know. Did you get those Back to the Future vibes?
I didn't, but now that you mention that, makes a lot of sense. Like, the way it was like put together in this episode, yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you say that. His name is Jim Corrigan, and basically, what I was expecting at the end of this episode is that he was going to shoot her in the back, and that was going to be the setup to her being in the wheelchair. But I guess maybe they just don't go that route. Do something completely different.
I don't think they're going to go in that direction.
One point, it looked like she was about to get shot, and I was like, "Oh no, don't do this!"
See, I think that's what they wanted you to think. I think they wanted you to think.
I think so
that she was
too.
getting a shot, but
especially when you like have an image of a gun next to Barbara Gordon, it's like if you know what's coming in the comics, it's like it triggers you. So I thought it was like, okay, that's a really well done visual to kind of trigger the audience members that are known to like know that Barbara Gordon gets shot in the back, and that leads to her being in a wheelchair. So that was a really cool way to play with the audience. And like I mentioned, like the way this is set up, it's like a John Wick hit contract type of deal. They didn't even, I don't know if they mentioned the name of that guy with the bullseye face, but that was a really cool, like, rendering of
Onomatopoeia is his name.
Okay, that's Onomatopoeia. Okay. I always mix them Onomatopoeia and Kick Tough for some reason. I don't know why, but Onomatopoeia's design is so, like, it's kind of like almost like that era of like the Shadow. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, this is intended to be the
I mean, it's
1940s,
that era,
so
so yeah, I think that was like a perfect way to do it, and it just looks so good. And then the way that everything kind of comes together towards the end and the big fight at the end, so that was really cool. I like this episode a lot, and I really like the reason that the hit was put on in the first place, because it was actually someone that Barbara defended, and she's like, "I got you the best deal possible," and he's like, "No, you didn't. You kind of got me something else, man." He just kind of made himself the victim, and I was like, "Dude, you're making yourself the victim when you're like this hardened criminal." It's like, what a fucking asshole. So that was really like a cool, like heelish kind of thing. That's a good heel work, I think. So, yeah, I like the villain in this episode as well. Even though I kind of forget his name, but he's just the guy that Barbara failed, so to speak. But when really Barbara did the best she could for him. So
for sure, yeah, this is like an 8.5 or 9 for me. I think this is excellent. This
yeah,
is
I
to
got it
me the
about an eight and a
show.
half. 8.5.
This is the show at its best. And again, the thing that is making the show good is the fact that they are elevating other characters, not just Batman. I think that's really important, and not just the Rogues Gallery. Like, of course, Batman does have the best Rogues Gallery in comics, but they're putting in the work of developing other protagonists that are not either Batman or members of the Bat family, and that to me is what is separating the show from the others.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned already, like some of these plots can be their own. And I mentioned the horror movie plot, but this is definitely like something that if you ever want to rip off a John Wick type movie and produce it on your own, this is the like the structure you got to follow. Something like this, and then a cool twist at the end, and you got yourself a cool 90-minute action movie. So, um, yeah, I really like this plot structure a lot. I think it just really sticks out a lot for me.
Absolutely. Let's talk about episode 8. You were wondering about Haley Joel Osment. We got Haley Joel Osment. We also got McKenna Grace as well, playing the other villain role. There's a lot to talk about with this episode, just because we have the supernatural elements, but Brian, I think there's a very real possibility that either a Robin or a group of Robins have been introduced into Batman Caped Crusader.
Yeah, it's weird because I didn't pick up on that, but it was a redhead, so maybe you're right. So I don't know if they were kind of leaning towards that, but I mean, it
I
did
mean, the
make
fact
sense.
that he is such a good shot with the slingshot, he is an
Yeah,
orphan.
I didn't think much of it, but I was like, maybe he's just too young for that kind of role to be Robin. But I guess that was kind of the idea and the intention. But again, this plot for this episode is very like this was like a Blumhouse type movie where it's like this. I guess she's not really like a ghost. She's just like a kid that has this power to suck people's energy out, and she's
She's like an energy. I would say the closest. I don't know that she's an energy vampire, but that is what
that's
I think
my
she's.
thing too, because the sunlight almost kills her, and she's sucking energy out. She's like the energy vampire in What We Do in the Shadows, but she doesn't have to annoy them to death first. Colin Robinson, but yeah, it was just like so disturbing, kind of, because I was at first when you see what she's doing, like, oh my god, is she murdering this child? And we're watching this like in animation, like we're watching a child murder right now. What's going on? And then it turns out that like barely energy left, so that's okay. They're playing with the lion right there, but then she does it to like two other kids, and it just gets really disturbing every time she does it because she's so predatory about it, and because she's a little girl, she's doing that innocence thing, like, oh, let me help you find your mom, let me help you find your whatever, let me help you out, and just totally takes advantage of these kids, and it's just so disturbing. What I was expecting is that Anton Knight, which is the character that Haley Joel Osment plays, I was expecting an unhinged kind of villain because the way that he looks in real life with his beard and he's got a little overweight, he's good at playing like the unhinged kind of characters in live action. But in this case, he was kind of grounded and he was just trying to protect his sister, and his sister was just being a manipulative fucking psychopath, and it was just very disturbing. So you felt really bad for Anton Knight because he was just trying to like, despite the showmanship of like whatever, you know, experiment they were trying to do, almost like Victor Timely in Loki season 2, it had that vibe to it. It just was just so disturbing because no matter how hard he tried to just make her normal and make her feel normal, she's just this energy vampire, and it's just so disturbing. And the way she's drawn, you can't help but think of Wednesday Addams, right? So I think that was very intentional. And the way that she just talks to these kids is just very dark and disturbing. So this idea of like an energy vampire coming into a town like in the 1940s, going to carnivals, hunting down kids, and then when you make it set up where it's like you think that the killer is actually the brother and it's actually the sister, and if you make that the twist at the end, dude, you got a fucking cool 90-minute horror movie right there for cheap. You know what I'm saying? Again, this is one of those ideas that I was like, man, that maybe they should just make this into a movie with no Batman, just make it its own thing, give it to Blumhouse, they'll produce it for like $3 million, they'll make $12 million in the box office, another $5 million on streaming, and make the money back, right? But it's just so crazy that they used it for a Batman episode. Like I mentioned before in the previous episodes, like this is such a good plot on its own. I felt like this could have
Again,
been.
I just don't know. I don't know that Warner Brothers has a desire to do a horror themed Batman.
It's not even Horror Brothers. You give it to Blumhouse. They work with Universal and they work with different companies. Like
That's absolutely why they won't do it, though. And again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying they won't do it on principle, unless I mean,
it's just like waste of like good plots. You know what I'm saying? Like this is such a good plot on its own that I don't even think it needed Batman. You could have just made some, another character the centerpiece.
I mean, I think it's really stupid that we just don't get a Batman movie every year. Just give a director $10 million to do their own version of Batman and go with it.
And you would get something like this. You would totally get something like this because it's simple setting.
Like this. Why wouldn't you want a horror Batman? Just do it for cheap. Just do it for cheap. I don't understand. It's really frustrating. Again, though, I think in terms of experimentation, this is why. I mean, this episode is why Caped Crusader is on Amazon Prime. And again, I think that it doesn't totally work. I think this works better than the Ghost episode because I think there's a lot more ethos. A lot of the villains up to this point have kind of been bad because they make bad decisions. This feels like kind of a harkening back to the way a lot of Batman villains are, where there is that tragic element. Like Harley Quinn is not really a tragedy. Clayface, not a tragedy. Harvey Dent, not necessarily a tragedy. They're kind of making their own. They're making their own problems. And the thing that I like so much about this is that this is a rare case of tragedy, and I think it works out extremely well. And a great voiceover by McKenna Grace. I think she is one of the better ones. Of course, she is probably best known for being a granddaughter of Egon in the Ghostbusters movies. But she does such a good job with this voiceover role. And I will say Haley Joel Osment does a good job too. But we should get into the overall premise of the show, of the episode, is that this is taking place at a carnival. It is a Harvey Dent campaign event, and really Harvey Dent doesn't care about kids disappearing. Bruce Wayne does, but there is a great scene, I would say kind of an underrated scene. Bruce Wayne is trying to find this girl, and I guess the carny freaks beat him up because he's going after young girls. And like, we of course know Bruce Wayne and Batman as being good, but I love the idea that he's kind of not necessarily being creepy, but you could see a world where he would get his ass kicked for asking around about young girls.
And considering that his public reputation is very assholish, like I mentioned before, it just kind of fits the bill that you would be suspect of the guy asking about that, and then of course wanting to beat him up. I love the design of like the funhouse mirrors, because anytime you do that in a real movie or live action, it looks really cool in a horror movie. But in this case, they had to animate it, and when you animate it, it's even harder to get the exact reflections for the different angles and stuff. So they really had to animate that really well, and they did so. And I really like the mirrors in the funhouse. And then it's crazy that, like, okay, so Anton Knight, what happens? They're in the fight. He gets into a fight with his sister. She throws him against a shelf, and the shelf falls on him, and he goes, "I can't feel my legs." And immediately I thought, well, that's really disturbing. I don't know how you're gonna teach. I mean, as a kid, if you watch this as a kid and you hear the phrase "I can't feel my legs," it's like, I mean, God, that's so like such a sad moment, right? And then when you hear later that he died, I was like, God, that's so sad. But that's part of the tragedy. And I guess Anton Knight is supposed to be a pseudo villain, but in this case, he's just a guy trying to protect his sister. And I thought, well, there's the tragedy right there. So they got that down really well. And yeah, Haley Joel Osment did a really good job of like playing the protective brother role, and you could hear it in his voice that he just really wanted to protect his sister. And he's like, you gotta tell me this is the last one. This is the last one in terms of like the victims and stuff. So there's definitely that, like that idea that he's enabling her, right? And that's kind of like an idea that you have in horror movies sometimes when you have a killer and you have an enabler for the killer. So that really works really well. So they got a lot of the horror elements down and the suspense elements down, and with the Harvey Dent stuff in the background, it just kind of shows you that I guess he does. I mean, based on what he says, he does care. But the problem is that he's too much of an asshole and looking out for himself. That, you know what I mean? Like, he does want to take down the bad guys, but I guess he wants the glory.
So
and fame
what
to
you're
go with it.
saying is that he's very two-faced.
That's what I'm getting at. Yes, that's what I'm getting at. But it's not the traditional Two-Face that's where Harvey Dent is the straight up babyface, which is what we've been used to. You know what I'm saying? So this idea that it's complex.
I like the layers that they're putting on. They're doing these different interpretations, and I love that Harvey Dent is kind of two-faced before he becomes two-faced. I think that's something that's refreshing.
And then at the end of the episode, spoiler, this is where he gets the acid in the face, right? But I think the question is at this point for the audience is that do you care or do you empathize with him? I slightly empathize with him because based on what he did, and he didn't take the bribe, right? He didn't take the money from Thorne overall, right? Or did he give the money back?
I mean, he's annoying and he's kind of an asshole, but he's not a complete asshole, I guess. And I think that's what you're kind of looking at.
That's what I'm kind of like getting at, yeah. And I think that's the change in character. So that's why I'm kind of empathetic towards him. I think if he was more of leaning towards the asshole side and really didn't give a shit about the kids at all, then maybe I wouldn't care that he got the acid to the face. But he just sounded like, I mean, the way that Dietrich Bader actually voiced the character too when he got the acid to the face was like also kind of disturbing because it sounded like he was in pain. And it was just not like the traditional cartoonish, like hurting kind of sound. It was like a disturbing, like this dude's face is burning off kind of sound. And I was like, okay, they really went full with it. And now I'm looking forward to the next episode to see what he looks like. I haven't spoiled it yet, but I wonder if it's going to be a little green, a little gray. We saw red burn marks in the live action version. So there's a lot of ways to play with the Two-Face makeup. So that's kind of where I'm looking forward to. And I want to see the distinction in the voice that Dietrich Bader is going to bring to it, because obviously once you turn into Two-Face, your voice is going to get a little darker and deeper and a little more sadistic. So I want to see where it goes. And I wonder if he's actually going to shoot Thorne as a payback, because that seems like the perfect setup for Two-Face to get revenge on the guy. He always kind of gets revenge on the guy anyway that gives him the acid on the face. So I think we're getting that scene probably soon, and we're going to establish that Two-Face is going to cross the line and actually kill people.
I mean, again, I look at the costume choices that they have made, and even though I think the show has been both grounded, but it also has this supernatural element, I am so curious to see the design, because if you look at Harley Quinn's costume, like that is very practical. You look at the Penguin's design, more on the practical end of things, like Clayface is not like a big hulking monster. There's a lot of different directions, and I'm very, very curious to see where they go with it, because it feels like the Dark Knight, like it was CGI, it kind of looked good, but it didn't feel like it was repulsive enough, if that makes sense. And it feels like that was a real missed opportunity. And again, just Two-Face in general has to be one of the hardest characters to do in live action. It almost feels like it is a character better suited for animation.
Yeah, because you can play around with the visual of the face. So I think that's really key. Because you mentioned Dark Knight. Like I said, that's more based on actual real burn victims. And if you look at compared to the animated show or like Batman Forever, they went with the grotesque, over the top kind of look to it. I've yet to see a version where it's like gangrene. I know that's very disturbing when I say that out loud, but if you kind of look at the way that his face was burning off, you can almost imagine some of the stuff on his face went gangrene, right? Like dead skin cells, that kind of thing. There's a lot to play with, and I'm kind of want to see.
I mean, I think that's kind of what the design is in the animated series. I know he was blue, but I thought that they were going for like
molding, like it was just literally molding off his face kind of thing, and that's kind of what I want for this. I want more green too, because I feel like green is like a color that, I don't know, that doesn't get used a lot in the Batman palette, so to speak. And I just feel like this is a good opportunity for that, but we'll see. Because if you notice in the show too, there's not a lot of bright red, not a lot of bright colors. So when you do that with a show like this, I think you can pick like a green color, and then it'll just really stick out because everything else is dark. But we'll see. I haven't spoiled it for myself yet.
All right, next week is our finale as we will be discussing episodes 9 and 10. Very curious to see how this show ends up. I'm sure we're going to get some resolution to the Harvey Dent storyline because it has very much been in the focus in the last two episodes, 7 and 8. Any final thoughts before we head out?
I did like this episode, Nocturne, but again, it's crossing into that supernatural territory. But I felt like they did this in a grounded kind of way, if that makes sense. So it wasn't so supernatural; it was more so of like controlling a psychotic killer kind of thing. So that's what kind of grounded it for me, even though there's some supernatural elements. But again, this is such a good idea for like a real movie, man. I could just imagine $2 million budget, everyone in 40s costumes, kind of like Pearl. You shoot it at a dark carnival with a darkly lit because there's no natural lighting hardly in 1940s, whatever. So I could just picture it in my head, and it would just be a really cool 90-minute horror movie. But whatever, I'm not a producer, but I do have good ideas apparently.
All right, so for Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.